He once yelled in drunken wrath backstage, got jailed for pointing a gun at his wife, and was sacked from the same band he helped start. The following morning, he took the stage and performed a piece that was so lovely, silently, it walked out of the room. That would be Dickey Betts, the unstoppable Southern artist, the author of Ramblin Man, the only Allman Brothers song to reach the Billboard Top 10, the composer of Jessica, a wordless symphony that made Southern rock a genre with genuine emotional depth, and the man who destroyed all relationships, reputations, marriages, and friendships, just to live and perform music the way he felt was right. If Duane Allman was the Allman Brothers Band's fallen angel, Betts was the band's living soul, wounded, unruly, and uncontrollable. You could sense the loneliness, longing, and agony woven into every note as he played the guitar, as if narrating his own life story. No words were necessary, just one riff. This is the story of Dickey Betts, an unrestrained genius, an unrelenting rebel, and an artist whose music endures despite his silent departure in 2024. And if you hear a music, do you really think you understand a legend? Childhood. Dickey Betts was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, on December 12, 1943. However, he wasn't shaped there. Bradenton was his upbringing, a tiny farming community on Florida's southwest coast, where time seemed to move more slowly. Gravel roads spat up crimson dust, and orange trees stretched in all directions. Despite his family's lack of riches and prestige, the music of the American South was always present. At neighborhood get-togethers, his father, a shy, hard-drinking man with odd occupations, played the banjo and mandolin. His mother frequently turned on the radio while cooking since she enjoyed swing music. Growing up, Betts was surrounded by Bill Monroe, Hank Williams, and the Carter family on a daily basis. Music wasn't just a pipe dream. It was a reality, there on the front porch. Betts began playing the ukulele at the age of 6. He then progressively progressed to the banjo, mandolin, and violin, but he didn't realize this was his fate until he touched his first electric guitar, which he had borrowed from a neighbor. Little Dickey would take the guitar outside to the porch every day and repeatedly play the same tunes he heard on the radio. He was not taught to read music. He picked up knowledge via feeling and hearing. He displayed the spirit of an artist at an early age, not the idealistic, sensitive sort, but the streetwise kind that depends on music for survival. His defiant, obstinate, and uncontrollable nature was evident from an early age. Betts was a rule hater. He once dropped out of a church music class because the teachers made him follow the book. "I'm not in tune because I play music." In a rare interview regarding his early years, he once stated, "I play to feel alive." Betts' childhood wasn't quiet, but there weren't any significant family catastrophes. Men were trained to be tough, resilient, and never weak in the milieu in which he was raised. Any feelings were to be dumped into a fist or a glass. However, Betts took a different route. He gave the guitar everything of his feelings. It was the only place where he could be vulnerable, recall, hurt, and fantasize without feeling guilty. He left school at the age of 16, not because he didn't succeed but rather because he didn't learn the necessary skills. He started touring the Tampa Bay area's pubs, clubs, and county fairs, while playing in local bands including the Jokers, Soul Children, and Second Coming. "I played a bar where the patrons brought guns but no one shot while I played Sweet Home Alabama," he once remarked. "All they did was listen. I realized then that I could live off of music." Nobody could have predicted at the time that the long-haired Bradenton boy wearing high boots and leather jackets was bearing the seeds of a musical revolution, a genre without a name yet. It was an undefined style of guitar playing. However, Betts didn't require a label. A guitar, a stage, and a little southern wind rustling his collar at the conclusion of each song were all he needed. The soul of southern rock was already developing, even though it had not yet been born. The spirit had already started to sing in the early drunken evenings of the sweltering Florida summers, when Dickey Betts played his first riffs on a borrowed guitar. Early professional life. Dickey Betts was merely a hired gun before his name ever made it onto the cover of Southern rock legends. He played guitar in dive bars, bar bands, and local touring groups, where his music frequently had to compete with the sound of beer bottles popping and inebriated laughter. However, he honed his intuition in those dusty, gritty settings, places devoid of sound engineers and studios, where music either flourished or perished in the heat of the moment. Betts started experimenting with dual harmonies and prolonged improvisation in the 1960s, while playing with bands like the Jokers and the Second Coming, a Florida-based psychedelic rock band. Although none of the band members were well known, Betts immediately established himself as a unique guitarist in the Southern underground scene. He performed blues with a touch of country, rock infused with jazz, and most importantly, he was able to transform a solo into a narrative. During this time, Betts got to know Barry Oakley, a young bassist with a strong groove, who would ultimately change his life. In addition to being Betts' close buddy, Oakley served as a conduit for two brothers, Duane and Greg Allman, who were looking for something more. Duane Allman returned to the South in 1969 following a fruitless stint in California with the band Hourglass, resolved to start a new genre of band that didn't exactly fit within rock but went beyond traditional blues. Duane believed he had discovered the right man after just one jam session. Allman and Betts were different, yet they complemented one another. One was brash and incisive, while the other was reflective and emotional. They didn't compete to be the best, they blended together without clashing, playing side by side like two parts of a single spirit. The new band was formally founded in March 1969 in Jacksonville, Florida, with Greg Allman on vocals, keys, Barry Oakley on bass, and drummers Butch Trucks, Jai Johani, and Jimo Johansson. Since Duane had come up with the concept, they called themselves the Allman Brothers Band, but Dickey Betts was a crucial component from the start. This was more than simply a band to Betts, it was a second family, somewhere he could play solos for 10 minutes without anyone interrupting him, where he wasn't forced to control his desires. When he and Duane took the stage, they invented guitar harmonies, melodic lines that flowed together like two rivers, a sound that would later come to define Southern rock. The Allman Brothers Band's 1969 debut album received positive reviews from reviewers, despite not being a commercial success. Betts's jazz-influenced composition, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, swiftly rose to prominence as one of the band's performance highlights. It was Betts's initial statement: he was more than just a guitarist, his music told a tale. With the support of Betts's subdued architecture, the Allman Brothers Band created a third rote in a rock landscape split between California's psychedelic and the British invasion, bringing the grit, sorrow and pride of the American South to the stage. Dickey Betts helped usher in a new era of American rock music with his 20-minute jams at Fillmore East and his poetic riffs in songs like Dreams and Revival. Betts was no longer a hired hand, but his career was only getting started. He was now a part of an emerging legend, professional achievement. The Allman Brothers Band was devastated when Duane Allman passed away in a motorbike accident in 1971. The leader of the band was gone, a musical fraternity had been shattered, and everyone's eyes went to Dickey Betts, even if nobody said it out. Nobody was really prepared. However, Betts was aware that the band would disband unless he took charge. And he did step up, but he did so with a guitar that shouted louder than ever before rather than with booming statements. Betts did more than simply take over lead guitar duties. While Duane was not there, he led the band from adversity to commercial success by writing more, performing longer, and singing more. Betts was the creative force behind Brothers and Sisters, which was released in 1973. He composed the 7-minute instrumental song Jessica, which is bursting with emotion despite having no lyrics or vocals. It was more than a song. In a guitar chat, he talked about how much he missed Duane, how happy he was to be a parent, and how he thought there was a type of music that might endure. However, it was Dickey Betts' song Ramblin Man, which he wrote, sung, and which became the band's first and only top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, that cemented his status as a legend. Aside from being the most commercially successful Southern rock song ever, it was also a masterful turnabout that introduced country rock elements that were both approachable and sophisticated enough to maintain artistic integrity. The Allman Brothers Band ruled America's largest venues from 1973 until 1976. In addition to being a guitarist, Dickey Betts was the band's primary songwriter, lead vocalist, and occasionally the unifying factor when Gregg Allman struggled with drugs and legal issues. Meanwhile, under the constant shadow of the Allman name, Betts started to feel as though the band was turning into a cage that restricted his creativity. Thus, Highway Call, his debut solo album, was published in 1974. It was an unexpected turn, a modest rootsy kind of folk country jazz, replete with steel guitar and fiddle, without lengthy jam band solos or southern electric blues. For the first time the audience witnessed a different side of Betts, gentle, nomadic and smiling quietly, while playing an acoustic guitar on a wooden porch. Betts continued after that. He started Dickey Betts and Great Southern, his own band, in 1977, Great Southern, 1977, and Atlanta's Burning Down, 1978, were two albums that demonstrated his disinterest in being a carbon copy of himself. He played what he dubbed Americana before the term was ever coined, deviating from both the Allman sound and even audience expectations. Betts continued to tour non-stop during this period, taught young guitarists, and shared his unique live improvisation and twin harmony technique. With a guitar and a devoted band of musicians, he became a true bandleader without the help of scandal or media attention. When the Allman Brothers got back together in the 1980s and 1990s, Betts continued to be a key songwriter, but never relinquished his position as Great Southern's leader. He guided the group through the throwback rock phase in the late 1990s, bringing Southern rock to life in each 20-minute live jam and concert. He reunited Great Southern in 2000 and put out a number of live recordings, including Instant Live and Live at the Odeon. Lauded by reviewers, despite their lack of widespread appeal, Betts played what he had to play, never caving in, never following trends, and never playing what the crowd demanded. After a number of years off, he announced in 2018 that he would be going back on stage, this time with his son Dwayne Betts, in a tour that was generally seen as a passing of the torch. Like his father, Dwayne played the guitar, but he was more composed. Their appearance at the Peach Festival that year was thought to be the final time that spectators would see the Southern guitar soul ignite on stage, but now it has been ignited by two generations. Dickey Betts experienced a cerebral hemorrhage shortly after. After a protracted recuperation, he finally stopped performing completely. Most importantly though, he never stopped playing music. From bar bands to sold-out Fillmore performances, from the Allman Brothers main stage to Great Southern solo tours, Betts demonstrated one thing over the course of 5 decades. Approval is not necessary for music, all that is required is honesty. Dickey Betts continued to live and perform as though it were the only thing that was still worth holding on to. Tragedy and scandals. Some artists wane due to a lack of skill, others, as they don't have the chance. In Dickey Betts' situation, however, it was the tragedy of having too much skill and being ensnared in an ego that no one could control, not even him. Intoxicated and feeling trapped by the legacy he helped build, Betts had started to spiral by the 1990s. He celebrated without drinking. He drank to numb an inside ache that Dwayne Allman's twin guitar used to alleviate, but nothing else could do so following Dwayne's passing. Betts, a free spirit, was crushed behind schedules, performances, expectations, and the need to live up to a brand that had long confined him, because the band had grown into a huge machine. He became irate, drank, and occasionally vanished silently. He caused a ruckus at a strip club in 1996, and was arrested for refusing to leave. With the headline, "From Fillmore to Jail, Dickey Betts Back in Trouble Again," his image appeared on the main page. Supporters started to split. He needed help, they said. Some were direct. The Allman heritage is being destroyed by Betts. However, it was nothing in comparison to the 2000 implosion. Dickey Betts got the one thing no musician ever wants after weeks of mysterious absences, tense situations backstage, and unpredictable conduct during practices. A fax. He was sacked from the Allman Brothers Band in this manner. No phone call, no meeting. Nobody gave him a direct look. He only received a letter at home, telling him that the band will go on with their summer tour without him. The man who, according to facts, penned the band's biggest song, Ramblin Man, kept the Allman Brothers together when Duane passed away, and once referred to Greg Allman as my brother on stage, before being kicked out of the band he helped form. He didn't remain silent. Betts filed a lawsuit. The press flocked. Lines were drawn by fans. Some took Dickey's side, while others took Greg's. It was dubbed one of the biggest betrayals in American music by some. Some referred to it as a fitting conclusion for a man who lacked self-control. Betts, on the other hand, just stated that I wasn't the issue. They were still in existence because of me. Shortly after, the Allman Brothers resumed their tour, but without Blue Sky, Jessica, or that untamed, unpredictable edge. They were more polished, tighter, and lacked the feeling that the music was being performed by a survivor, something that only Betts could provide. Betts went on tour with his own band in the ensuing years, however the previous spark never fully reappeared. His audience shrank, and the media stopped covering him. The people who used to stand next to him were now on the other side of the quiet. He continued to perform the Grammy-winning instrumental, Jessica. It was no longer a happy anthem though. It was a speech, an echo, from a person the world had forgotten. Betts did not overdose and die. He didn't lose his mind. He didn't commit suicide. However, even though he was still living, performing, and singing, he became a shadow of himself in a field where artists are praised for being current, and rejected for the same reason. Dickey Betts' tragedy was not caused by a single fall, bullet or accident. His tragedy was gradual, unrelenting, and excruciating. He realized that the world he had contributed to had changed, and no longer had room for him. He carried his instrument forward in silence, bitterness, and quiet as he dealt with it. No begging, no looking back, no apologies. Private life. However, as time passed and Betts' use of drugs and alcohol increased, their shared life began to resemble a battleground. When Donna called the police to their house in 1996, it was the most startling event. She stated in the report that Betts had aimed a handgun at her head in a fit of rage after taking heroin and cocaine. Donna declined to testify, thus the matter was never prosecuted, but the incident permanently damaged his private life. The family's violent past was brought to light in 2017, when Donna was jailed for pointing a rifle at a group of schoolchildren participating in sports close to their house. Betts, however, never abandoned her. Even though there were no more fights to win, they strangely stayed together till the very end, like two survivors in the same trench. In spite of broken marriages and unrelenting conflict, Betts never wavered in his devotion for his kids, particularly his son Duane Betts, who was named after his musician brother Duane Allman, whom Betts once referred to as his soulmate. Dickey Betts was the type of musician that was uncontrollable, and when he fell in love, he was the type of man that no one could stay with for very long. Betts was married 5 times. Every woman who came into his life seemed to go through the same cycle. She was brought in by his talent and passion, captivated by the tender spontaneity that came out when he held a guitar, and exhausted by his impatience, outbursts of rage, and the long, icy silences that followed his drinking binges. According to those who lived close to him, Betts loved with brutal honesty, giving his heart and his recklessness to the other person without holding anything back. However, the early wives were rarely well known. His early marriages all ended in divorce, tears, and courtrooms full of resentful words, possibly as a result. His 4th marriage was a watershed. He wed Donna Betts, an independent woman who refused to be intimidated. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Donna was more than just his spouse. She was his traveling companion. She was his tour manager at one point, and she even got into a fight with him on stage when he refused to put down the bottle before a performance. Early on, they resembled two warriors. One was a fierce artist, and the other was a resolute woman. Duane Betts was a successor as well as a son. Duane appeared to channel the young Dickey, who was still full of aspirations and had not yet been crushed by reality, based on the way he played, wrote, and carried himself on stage. Betts was never a father who was warm and visibly affectionate. He never publicly declared, "I love you." However, the way Betts looked at Duane with pride and subdued passion when they performed Blue Sky and Ramblin' Man together on stage in 2018 said it all. Following a stroke in 2022, Betts virtually disappeared from the public eye. He was loved by Donna, and Dwayne continued the family's musical tradition. Betts stopped performing, fighting, and being torn by the weight of his celebrity in his last months. He had a calm life with his modest family, letting his son carry on the path he had started. Dickey Betts wasn't a flawless man. He didn't work with ladies. He harmed those he cared about. Once unbreakable relationships were ruined by him. He never ran away from any of it though. He was as honest in love as he was in music, and even if it might not have resulted in long-term joy, his unvarnished, abrasive honesty made him a genuine, unforgettable person, not just to his admirers, but to those who loved him, abandoned him, and then remained. Legacy and influence. Dickey Betts demonstrated his value without the necessity for a formal tribute show or a string of consecutive Billboard positions. In the annals of American rock, particularly Southern rock, he left behind an indelible legacy. He didn't only write a smash song as Ramblin Man's main songwriter. For the Free South, he composed an anthem. Every American with a rural heritage could see themselves reflected in this song. You see more than just a guitar when Jessica plays the Grammy-winning instrumental. You see an open sky, an unending trip, and the soul of a nomad who belongs nowhere except in the song. Betts was the first to combine classic blues structures, 5-string banjo phrasing, and a Gibson Les Paul guitar to create a distinctive Southern rock sound that was influenced by jazz and country. It wasn't a duel when he and Dwayne Allman played dual guitar. Two souls were moving in unison. Betts has been cited by later musicians like as Warren Haynes, Derek Trucks, Charlie Starr of Blackberry Smoke, and even John Mayer as an example of American guitar playing that is characterized by grace and grit. He was also among the few musicians who made it through every internal turmoil of the Allman Brothers band, from unexpected passings to court battles, all the while maintaining the Southern flavor in each piece. None of his songs used production techniques, electronic tricks, or stage effects. With his guitar, Betts delivered tales that listeners could relate to. He had a philosophy, a way of life, play from the heart, and never compromise to win others over. His influence went beyond just technical. Dickey Betts was a man who dared to defy the market, to maintain rawness, and to accept flaws, as long as they were genuine, in a time when the market controls every product. Because of his integrity, he became a global icon for independent musicians. The next generation's breath is perhaps the most priceless legacy Betts left behind, rather than being preserved on record. Dwayne Betts, his son, has more than simply a legendary name. He performs songs with the same fervor, Southern pride, and lack of pretense as his father did. The brightest flame for Southern rock is currently being carried by Dwayne and the Allman Betts Band, who have continued Dickey Betts' legacy into the 21st century, without compromising its uniqueness. No autobiography, no lofty declarations. The musical legacy of Dickey Betts speaks for itself. Deeply personal, yet able to reach millions. Fierce yet emotional, complex yet free. Without his presence, that legacy lives, breathes, and grows with each note of blue sky that still reverberates. Last year's Dickey Betts never went back on stage after having a stroke in 2018 that necessitated emergency brain surgery. He lived a peaceful life in his bayfront home in Osprey, Florida, where the guitar by his bedside became his last company, and the sound of the waves took the place of cheers. He stopped touring and standing in front of the lights, but he continued to spend hours sitting quietly on the porch and looking out over the water, where he used to fish when he was younger. His neighbors remembered him humming ancient songs, whispering unreleased melodies, and occasionally sitting silently for hours on end, as though he were conversing with a long-dead person. Dickey Betts died on April 18, following a protracted fight with cognitive impairment and chronic obstructive lung disease. He passed away in the precise location where he had decided to spend the remainder of his life, surrounded by his spouse, kids, grandkids, and the timeless sound of music. He was 80 years old. There was not a lavish memorial service or a flood of tweets from famous people. However, it was the day that America lost the last authentic voice of the Southern guitar, according to those who genuinely loved music. Not fame was his legacy, it was musical integrity, something not all artists are brave enough to maintain. He never made concessions, followed fads, altered his look to fit in, or returned to express regret for the past. He did what he wanted to do: live, create, love, rebel, and grieve. Then, like a tired wanderer, he retreated, without making a big deal out of it, or requesting praise. It was never simple to love Dickey Betts. He was complicated, impetuous, and prone to misunderstandings in both his music and his life. However, for those who had the patience to pay attention, there was a subdued honesty in every note he played, and every choice he made, even if they ended up being incorrect. He never established an empire, he didn't build a company, he didn't leave behind a major manifesto. The sound of the Southern guitar, however, which was so full of passion that it stopped you cold, was something else he left behind. Betts made the decision to live out of time at a time where everything needs to be flawless, staged, and viral. He preserved his melodies' imperfections, complexities, and wounds, because only then could the music be genuinely authentic. Additionally, give Blue Sky or Ramblin Man a little more attention. If you listen to them today, you'll sense the presence of a man who wasn't after immortality somewhere in the solo. All he was doing was answering the cry of freedom. Has there ever been a time in your life when you listened to Dickey Betts' music? Music is more than just sound, it's a memory and a feeling. Please share it in the comments. It is the last remnant that the deceased have left behind. I'll see you in the next story, where each artist lives their own life and is remembered forever.